Breaking the chains of financial limitation, overcoming money blocks. How to identify and eliminate subconscious beliefs that hinder wealth. Introduction: the invisible chains. Let's start with a question that might piss you off. Why are you still broke? Not struggling, not figuring it out, not on your way. Broke. The kind of broke that keeps you up at 3 a.m. scrolling job boards you're overqualified for. The kind that makes you lie to friends about why you can't meet for dinner. The kind that has you rehearse, "I'll just have water," before the waiter even arrives. You've read the books, followed the gurus, and cut out lattes like a monk in a caffeine cult. So why does your bank account still look like a cautionary tale? Here's the truth no one's brave enough to tell you. Your financial situation isn't about your job, your degree, or your self-control. It's about the ghosts, the ones haunting your wallet, whispering stories you didn't even know you'd memorized. These aren't your words. They're heirlooms passed down like your grandma's silverware, tarnished and heavy with generations of fear. Let me guess. You've been taught that financial freedom is a math problem. Crunch the numbers, follow the rules, and then boom, a life of beachside pina coladas and guilt-free steakhouse dinners. But what if I told you that's a lie? That spreadsheets and side hustles are just the surface? That the real work happens in the shadows, where your childhood piggy bank still calls the shots, and your parents' money fights echo in every financial decision you make? This book isn't another budget template. It's a rebellion, a jailbreak from the mental prisons built by scarcity, shame, and societal scripts that treat money like a sin instead of a tool. I won't ask you to manifest your way to millions or shame you for wanting security. Instead, we're going to dissect the lies you've swallowed, confront the invisible bargains you've made, and rewrite the story your bank account has been telling against your will. But first, let's address the elephant in the room. You may be terrified. Terrified that if you actually succeed, you'll lose yourself. That friends will resent you. That you'll become the kind of person you've secretly judged. I get it. Money isn't just money. It's identity, morality, legacy. But what if wealth isn't about having more, but being more? More aligned, more generous, more alive? By the end of this book, you won't just break the chains of financial limitation. You'll rewrite your DNA. You'll laugh at the absurdity of hustle culture, turn guilt into fuel, and discover that the chains holding you back were never locked, just held in place by stories you've outgrown. So, if you're ready to stop negotiating with lack and start flirting with possibility, turn the page. Your future self is waiting. Chapter 1. The Stories We Inherit. When you were 6 years old, what did money feel like? Was it the crumpled dollar your grandma slipped into your palm after church? The tense silence at the dinner table when bills arrived? Or the way your parents praised you for being practical while your sibling was called a dreamer? Your first encounters with money weren't about math, they were about meaning. That allowance wasn't just coins in a piggy bank. It was a lesson in what you had to do to earn love, safety, or approval. If you've ever felt like no amount in your bank account is enough, it's because that 6-year-old is still running the show, equating dollars with dignity. You've likely sabotaged a pay raise or talked yourself out of charging what you're worth. That's not a you problem, it's a story problem. And stories can be rewritten. Let's bury this idea. You're not bad with money. You're fluent in a financial dialect you didn't choose. Maybe your family spoke Scarcity 101. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. We'll never get ahead. Or perhaps yours was the dialect of silence. Money was never discussed, so you learned to whisper about it in shame. But here's the truth. Your money story isn't a published novel. It's just the first draft. Brains can't tell fact from fiction. If you've rehearsed "I'm not a money person" for years, Your brain will hand you anxiety, procrastination, and self-doubt on a silver platter, just to keep the story alive. Money is a language, and your family taught you its grammar, the unspoken rules about saving, spending, and deserving. Maybe yours was clipped sentences and cautionary tales. Don't you dare ask for more. Or a dialect of lack, where every money conversation felt like a storm warning. But you're allowed to become bilingual. The millionaire who retires their parents didn't get lucky. The single mom who builds an empire from her kitchen table isn't hustling harder. They learned a new dialect, one where money isn't a villain or savior, but a partner. Try this. For 24 hours, notice every time you think or say, "I can't afford that. It's too risky. Who am I to charge more?" Imagine those aren't your words. They're lines from a play written decades ago by people who were scared, tired, or heartbroken. Because that's exactly what you're doing, repeating an old play. Scarcity isn't reality, it's rehearsal. And rehearsal rooms are meant to be left. Let's dig deeper into this idea of the broken money mindset. It's a myth, and a dangerous one at that. The belief that you're inherently bad with money is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like trying to run a marathon with a ball and chain around your ankle. You're setting yourself up for failure before you even start. But here's the thing, you're not broken. You're just operating on outdated software. Think about it. When you were a kid, did anyone sit you down and teach you how to manage money? Probably not. You picked up bits and pieces from your environment, from the people around you, from the media. And let's be honest, those sources aren't exactly reliable. So what's the solution? Upgrade your software. Start by identifying the beliefs that are holding you back. Write them down. Then, one by one, challenge them. Ask yourself, is this belief true? Where did it come from? Is it serving me? For example, if you believe that rich people are greedy, ask yourself, is that true for every rich person I know? Chances are it's not. Your money story isn't carved in stone, it's etched in fog. And fog dissipates when you move toward the light. So let's start moving. Remember, the stories you've inherited are just that, stories. They're not your destiny. You have the power to rewrite them, to create a new narrative where money isn't a source of fear or shame, but a tool for freedom and abundance. So take a deep breath. You're not stuck. You're just at the beginning of a new chapter. And trust me, it's going to be a good one. Chapter 2, The Prison of Practicality. Let's talk about practicality. That word sounds so responsible, doesn't it? Practical, safe, sensible. But here's the truth. Practicality is often just fear in disguise. You see, playing it safe feels like the smart move. It feels like the grown-up thing to do. But here's the problem. Playing it safe keeps you small. It keeps you stuck in a box labeled good enough. And let me tell you something. Good enough is the enemy of greatness. Think about it. How many times have you talked yourself out of a big idea because it felt too risky? How many times have you settled for the safe option because it felt like the responsible choice? And how many times has that safe option left you feeling empty? Here's the hard truth. Practicality is a prison. And the worst part, you built it yourself. Let's break this down. The psychology of the good enough trap is sneaky. It convinces you that settling is smart. It tells you that dreaming big is reckless. It whispers, stay where you are. It's comfortable here. It's safe. But let me ask you this. When has anything extraordinary ever come from playing it safe? When has anyone ever changed their life, or the world, by staying in their comfort zone? The answer is never. You see, the good enough trap is rooted in fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of humiliation. And that fear, it's a liar. It tells you that failure is the worst thing that can happen to you. But here's the truth. The worst thing that can happen to you is not failing. It's never trying at all. Let me give you a metaphor. Think of your financial limitations as a cage. It's a cage you built yourself piece by piece with every practical decision, every safe choice, every time you told yourself, this is good enough. But here's the thing about cages, they have doors. And you have the key. You've always had the key. You just forgot where you put it. The key is your willingness to take risks. Your willingness to fail. Your willingness to look foolish in pursuit of something greater. So let me ask you this. What would you risk if failure didn't mean humiliation? If no one was watching, if no one was judging, if no one even knew you tried, what would you go for? Would you start that business? Would you ask for that raise? Would you invest in that idea that keeps you up at night? Here's the thing. Failure doesn't mean humiliation. It means learning. It means growth. It means you're one step closer to getting it right. Let's dive deeper into why playing it safe keeps you small. It's not just about money, it's about mindset. When you play it safe, you're essentially telling yourself, I'm not capable of more. And that's a dangerous story to believe. Think about it. Every time you choose the safe option, you're reinforcing the idea that you can't handle risk, that you can't handle failure, that you can't handle success. But here's the thing. You're capable of so much more than you think. You're capable of handling risk. You're capable of handling failure. And you're definitely capable of handling success. The problem is, playing it safe doesn't give you the opportunity to prove that to yourself. It keeps you stuck in a loop of what-ifs and if-onlys. So how do you break the cycle? First, you have to recognize when you're playing it safe. Pay attention to those moments when you feel the pull of practicality, when you feel the urge to choose the safe option. Then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I took a risk? And what's the best that could happen? Chances are, the worst-case scenario isn't as bad as you think. And the best-case scenario? It's probably better than you're allowing yourself to imagine. Think about it. Every time you tell yourself, I can't afford that, or I'll never be able to do that, or that's not for people like me, you're adding another bar to the cage. But here's the thing. You're the one building the cage. And that means you're the one who can tear it down. The key to breaking free is recognizing that the cage isn't real. It's another construct, a story, a belief, and beliefs can be changed. Now let's talk about the psychology of the good enough trap. This is where things get really interesting. The good enough trap is rooted in a psychological principle called the status quo bias. Basically, we're wired to prefer things the way they are. We're wired to resist change. And why wouldn't we be? Change is uncomfortable. Change is uncertain. Change is risky. But here's the thing. Change is also where growth happens. When you settle for good enough, you're essentially saying, I'm okay with staying the same. And that's fine if you're okay with staying the same. But if you're not, if you want more, if you want to grow, to evolve, to become the best version of yourself, then good enough isn't good enough. So, how do you break free from the good enough trap? First, you have to recognize it. Pay attention to those moments when you feel the pull of the status quo, when you feel the urge to settle. Then ask yourself, is this really good enough? Or am I just telling myself that because it's easier than striving for more? Finally, take action. Do something, anything, to move yourself out of the good enough zone. It doesn't have to be a big, dramatic gesture. It can be something small, something simple, something that proves to yourself that you're capable of more. Let me leave you with this question. What would you risk if failure didn't mean humiliation? This is a powerful question because it forces you to confront your fears. It forces you to imagine a world where failure isn't something to be ashamed of, where failure is just part of the process. So, take a moment to really think about it. What would you risk if failure didn't mean humiliation? Would you start that business? Would you ask for that raise? Would you invest in that idea that keeps you up at night? Remember, failure doesn't mean humiliation. It means learning. It means growth. It means you're one step closer to getting it right. Practicality is a prison, but you hold the key. You always have. It's time to stop playing it safe. It's time to stop settling for good enough. It's time to step out of the cage and into the life you were meant to live. Remember, the only thing worse than failing is never trying at all. Chapter 3: The Ghosts in Your Wallet. Let's talk about the ghosts in your wallet. No, I'm not talking about the crumpled receipts or the loose change you keep forgetting to cash in. I'm talking about the invisible forces that haunt your relationship with money, guilt, shame, and the quiet, insidious ways they steal your joy. You see, money isn't just numbers in a bank account. It's a mirror. It reflects your deepest beliefs, your unspoken fears, and the emotional baggage you've been carrying around for years. And if you've ever felt a pang of guilt when you splurge on something nice, or a flicker of shame when you check your balance, or a sinking feeling when you realize you're earning more than your parents ever did, those are the ghosts talking. But here's the thing, ghosts only have power if you let them. And it's time to stop letting them. Let's start with guilt and shame. These two emotions are like silent thieves, sneaking into your relationship with money and stealing your joy. Guilt shows up when you spend money on yourself. Maybe it's a new pair of shoes, a fancy dinner, or a vacation you've been dreaming about. You tell yourself you deserve it, but deep down there's a voice whispering, "You shouldn't be spending this much. What if you need it later? What if something goes wrong?" Shame, on the other hand, shows up when you don't have enough. Maybe you're struggling to pay the bills, or you're drowning in debt, or you're just not where you thought you'd be by now. Shame tells you you're bad with money. You're irresponsible. You'll never get ahead. Here's the truth. Guilt and shame are liars. They don't protect you. They don't motivate you. They just keep you stuck in a cycle of fear and self-doubt. So, how do you break free? First, you have to recognize the ghosts. Pay attention to those moments when guilt or shame creep in. When you feel that pang of discomfort, that flicker of unease, that sinking feeling in your stomach. Then ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is this really about money, or is it about something deeper? Finally, challenge the narrative. Remind yourself that spending money on yourself isn't selfish, it's self-care. Remind yourself that struggling with money doesn't make you a failure, it makes you human. And remind yourself that joy isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough, the guilt of out-earning your parents. For a lot of people, this is a deeply uncomfortable topic. You feel guilty for having more than your parents ever did. You feel like you're betraying them, like you're leaving them behind, like you're somehow saying their lives weren't good enough. But here's the thing, your success isn't a betrayal. It's an evolution. Think about it. Your parents worked hard, often harder than you'll ever have to give you the opportunities they never had. They sacrificed, they struggled, they did everything they could to make sure you had a better life than they did. And now you're living that life. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to celebrate. So, how do you let go of the guilt? First, you have to reframe the narrative. Instead of seeing your success as a betrayal, see it as a tribute. You're not leaving your parents behind. You're honoring their sacrifices by making the most of the opportunities they gave you. Then talk to them. Ask them about their dreams, their struggles, their hopes for you. You might be surprised by what you learn. Finally, pay it forward. Use your success to create opportunities for others. That's the best way to honor your parents' legacy. Money as a mirror. Think about it. Every time you look at your bank account, every time you make a purchase, every time you think about money, you're not just seeing numbers. You're seeing a reflection of your beliefs, your fears, your hopes, and your dreams. So, what do you see when you look in the mirror? Do you see guilt, shame, fear? Or do you see confidence, joy, and possibility? Here's the thing, the mirror doesn't lie, but it also doesn't judge. It just reflects what's already there. So, if you don't like what you see, change it. What if wealth isn't betrayal, but evolution? This is a powerful question because it forces you to reframe your relationship with money. It forces you to see your success not as a betrayal of your past, but as an evolution of your future. So, take a moment to really think about it. What if wealth isn't betrayal, but evolution? What if your success isn't something to feel guilty about, but something to celebrate? What if your financial growth isn't a betrayal of your parents, but a tribute to their sacrifices? What if your relationship with money isn't something to be ashamed of, but something to be proud of? Here's the thing, wealth isn't just about money. It's about freedom. It's about possibility. It's about creating the life you were meant to live. Chapter 4. The Lies We Worship. Let's talk about the lies we worship, the ones we've been conditioned to treat as the truth. You know the ones I mean. They're the stories we repeat to ourselves like mantras, the beliefs we defend even as they drain us, the toxic myths that keep us chasing empty goals instead of living full lives. These aren't harmless little fibs. They're the kind of lies that masquerade as wisdom, propped up by society, glorified by social media, and whispered in our ears by well-meaning people who've never stopped to question them. But here's the truth. Just because something is popular doesn't make it true. And it's time to stop kneeling at the altar of exhaustion, delusion, and self-betrayal. Take hustle culture, for starters. It's everywhere. The glorification of sleepless nights, the pride in skipped meals, the humble brags about being too busy to breathe. Hustle culture tells you that your worth is a math equation. Your value equals your output. The more you grind, the more you matter. The more you sacrifice, the more you deserve. But let me ask you this. When did exhaustion become a badge of honor? When did we start conflating suffering with success? The answer is simple, when we stopped asking why. Hustle culture isn't a path to greatness, it's a hamster wheel. It keeps you running in circles, too tired to notice that the finish line doesn't exist. You're not building a legacy, you're burning down your present to fund a future that never arrives. And that brings us to the delusion of I'll rest when I'm rich. This lie is sneaky because it sounds so reasonable. It's the promise that if you push just a little harder, sacrifice a little more, and delay joy a little longer, you'll eventually earn the right to rest. But here's the reality. When I'm rich is a mirage. It's a destination that keeps moving every time you get close. I've sat across from billionaires in boardrooms and single parents working 3 jobs, and you know what they have in common? They're both waiting for permission to breathe. The billionaire thinks, when I hit the next milestone, and the parent thinks, when the kids are out of the house. Meanwhile, life slips by. Joy becomes a reward you never collect. And burnout? It's not a sign you're on the right track, it's a broken compass. It points you toward success while leading you further from peace, health, and the things that actually matter. Burnout doesn't mean you're dedicated, it means you've lost your way. Let's pause here. Think about the last time you felt truly rested, not just physically but emotionally. When you laughed without guilt, slept without anxiety, or spend an hour doing nothing without calling it wasted time. If that feels like a distant memory, you're not alone. We've been taught to treat rest like a sin and productivity like a sacrament. But here's the irony. The most successful people I know, the ones who've built empires, transformed industries, and left legacies, aren't the ones who never slept. They're the ones who understood that creativity thrives in stillness, that breakthroughs happen in the gaps between striving, and that a rested mind is a magnetic mind. They didn't hustle harder, they hustled smarter. They respected their limits, honored their energy, and realized that time isn't something you conquer. It's something you dance with. So let's try a new story. What if your worth isn't a transaction? What if you're valuable not because of what you produce, but because you exist? What if success isn't about outworking everyone else, but about aligning with what lights you up? This isn't some fluffy self-help fantasy. It's a radical act of rebellion. It means looking hustle culture in the eye and saying, "No, I won't trade my sanity for your approval." It means deleting "I'll rest when I'm rich" from your vocabulary and replacing it with "I'll rest because I'm human." It means trusting that the world won't collapse if you take a nap, that opportunities won't vanish if you set a boundary, and that your value doesn't shrink when you're not productive. Hustle culture and the delusion of "I'll rest when I'm rich" are rooted in a deeper lie, the belief that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn your place in the world, that you have to prove your value, that you have to justify your existence. But here's the truth, you don't. Your worth is inherent. It's not something you have to hustle for. It's not something you have to earn. It's not something you have to prove. It's just there, always. This is the mind shift that changes everything. When you stop seeing your worth as a transaction, you start seeing it as a gift. When you stop tying your value to your output, you start tying it to your presence. When you stop chasing external validation, you start finding internal peace. So, what does this look like in practice? It looks like setting boundaries without apology. It looks like saying no to things that drain you, and yes to things that light you up. It looks like prioritizing rest, not as a reward, but as a right. It looks like treating yourself with the same kindness and respect you'd show someone you love. It also looks like redefining success. Success isn't about how much you can produce. It's about how much you can enjoy. It's not about how much you can hustle. It's about how much you can live. It's not about how much you can achieve. It's about how much you can experience. Here's a secret. The people who change the world aren't the ones chasing burnout. They're the ones who've mastered the art of focused effort and intentional rest. They work like hell on their priorities and protect their downtime like it's sacred. They understand that energy is currency, and they refuse to bankrupt themselves for someone else's bottom line. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped worshiping the lie that exhaustion equals excellence? What if you measured your days not by how much you crossed off a list, but by how much you enjoyed the life you're building? What if you treated yourself like a human being instead of a human doing? The answer isn't to abandon ambition, it's to redefine it. Ambition that drains you isn't ambition, it's addiction. Real ambition fuels you. It leaves room for lazy Sundays, quiet mornings, and the kind of joy that doesn't need a hashtag. It understands that rest isn't the enemy of success, it's the foundation. This isn't easy. It requires courage. It requires vulnerability. It requires a willingness to question everything you've been taught. But here's the thing. You're worth it. You're worth the effort. You're worth the risk. You're worth the journey. So the next time you feel guilty for taking a break, remember, even the sun rests every night, and it's still the most powerful force in the solar system. You don't have to burn out to shine. Chapter 5, The Alchemy of Enough. Let's talk about the alchemy of enough. The moment when you stop chasing more and start realizing that you are already abundant. This isn't about settling or giving up on your dreams. It's about shifting your relationship with money from one of scarcity to one of sufficiency. It's about redefining abundance not as a number in your bank account, but as a feeling in your heart. It's about understanding that the paradox of wanting less is often the key to gaining more. And it's about learning to see money not as something to clutch tightly, but as something to let flow freely like water. For most of us, abundance is tied to quantity. More money, more things, more success. But here's the truth. Abundance isn't about how much you have. It's about how much you enjoy what you have. Think about it. How many people do you know who have everything they thought they wanted but still feel empty? How many people do you know who are constantly chasing the next big thing but never feel satisfied? That's because abundance isn't a destination. It's a mindset. It's the ability to look at what you have and say, "This is enough." This doesn't mean you stop striving or dreaming. It means you stop tying your happiness to external achievements. It means you start finding joy in the present moment, in the simple things, in the life you're already living. It means you start seeing abundance not as something you have to earn, but as something you already are. Now let's talk about the paradox of wanting less to gain more. This might sound counterintuitive, but it's one of the most powerful truths I've learned. The more you focus on what you don't have, the more you feel the lack. The more you focus on what you do have, the more you feel the abundance. It's like trying to hold on to water. The tighter you clutch, the more it slips through your fingers. But if you open your hands, the water flows freely. Money works the same way. The more you cling to it, the more it controls you. The more you let it flow, the more it works for you. This doesn't mean you stop being responsible or stop planning for the future. It means you stop letting fear dictate your decisions. It means you start trusting that there's enough to go around, that you're enough as you are, and that the universe has a way of providing when you're open to receiving. Water is essential for life, but it's also fluid and ever-changing. It doesn't cling or hoard. It flows where it's needed, nourishing everything in its path. Money, when treated with the same fluidity, can do the same. It can nourish your life, your relationships, your dreams. But when you treat it like something to be hoarded, it becomes stagnant. It loses its power to create, to grow, to transform. So, how do you stop clutching and start letting it flow? First, you have to recognize the fear that's driving you. Fear of not having enough. Fear of losing what you have. Fear of being judged or rejected. Then, you have to challenge that fear. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I let go a little? What's the best that could happen? Finally, you have to take action. Start small. Give a little more. Spend a little more freely. Get what you want without checking the prices. Invest in something that lights you up. The more you practice letting go, the more you'll see that money, like water, is meant to flow. What if enough isn't a number, but a feeling? This question is a game changer because it forces you to reframe your relationship with money. It forces you to see abundance not as something external, but as something internal. It forces you to realize that you already have enough, not because of what's in your bank account, but because of what's in your heart. So, take a moment to really think about it. What if enough isn't a number, but a feeling? What if abundance isn't about how much you have, but about how much you enjoy what you have? Here's the thing. The alchemy of enough isn't about settling. It's about transforming your relationship with money from one of scarcity to one of sufficiency. It's about realizing that you're already abundant, that you're already enough, and that the life you're living is already rich with possibility. It's about shifting from a mindset of hunger to one of wholeness. Think about it. When you're hungry, truly hungry, you can't think about anything else. All you can focus on is the next meal, the next bite, the next moment of relief. But when you're whole, when you're full, you can think clearly. You can dream boldly. You can live fully. The same is true with money. When you're stuck in a mindset of scarcity, all you can think about is what you don't have. But when you shift to a mindset of sufficiency, you start seeing what you do have. You start appreciating it. You start enjoying it. And that's when the magic happens. So, how do you cultivate this mindset? Start by practicing gratitude. Take a moment each day to acknowledge what you have, no matter how small. Then, shift your focus from what's missing to what's present. Instead of thinking, I'll be happy when I have that thing, think, I'm happy because I have this thing. Finally, let go of comparison. Abundance isn't about having more than someone else. It's about having enough for yourself. The alchemy of enough is about transforming your relationship with money from one of fear to one of trust. It's about realizing that you don't have to clutch tightly to what you have. You can let it flow. You can let it grow. You can let it nourish your life and the lives of those around you. It's about understanding that the more you give, the more you receive. The more you let go, the more you gain. The more you trust, the more you thrive. Chapter 6: The Currency of Shadows. Let's talk about the currency of shadows, the hidden bargains you've made with money, the unspoken vows you've taken, and the ways you've traded pieces of yourself for approval, love, or a fleeting sense of safety. These are the deals you didn't even realize you were making, the agreements you signed in invisible ink, the promises you whispered to yourself in the dark. And here's the thing, until you bring these shadows into the light, they'll keep controlling you. They'll keep dictating your decisions, your relationships, and your relationship with money. But once you see them for what they are, you can rewrite the terms. Let's start with the hidden bargains. These are the silent contracts you've made with money, often without even realizing it. Maybe you've told yourself, if I just make enough, I'll finally be safe. Or, if I save enough, I'll finally be worthy. Or, if I never spend too much, I'll never be judged. These bargains sound reasonable, even responsible, but here's the truth. They're rooted in fear. Fear of not having enough. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being seen as too much or too little. And the problem with these bargains is that they're endless. No matter how much you make, save, or achieve, the goalposts keep moving. You're never quite safe enough, worthy enough, or free from judgment. Now let's talk about the poverty of people-pleasing. This is the belief that your value is tied to how much you can give, how much you can sacrifice, how much you can shrink yourself to make others comfortable. It's the voice that whispers, I'll stay small so you'll love me. It's the fear that if you charge what you're worth, if you say no, if you prioritize yourself, you'll be rejected. And here's the thing, people-pleasing doesn't just cost you money. It costs you your power, your voice, your sense of self. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of giving too much and receiving too little. It keeps you trading your worth for crumbs of approval. Let's dive deeper into the metaphor of debt as unspoken vows. Debt isn't just about money. It's about the promises you've made to suffer. Maybe you've promised to stay in a job you hate because it's secure. Maybe you've promised to keep giving to people who don't appreciate it because it's kind. Maybe you've promised to keep your dreams small because it's practical. These vows are like chains. They keep you tied to a version of yourself that's safe but small, comfortable but unfulfilled. And the longer you keep them, the heavier they become. Ask yourself, what am I really promising here? What am I sacrificing? What am I gaining? Then challenge the narrative. Remind yourself that you don't have to suffer to be safe. You don't have to shrink to be loved. You don't have to stay small to be accepted. What would collapse if you stopped earning approval? This is a powerful question because it forces you to confront the fear that's driving you. It forces you to imagine a world where your worth isn't tied to what you do, what you give, or what you sacrifice. It forces you to realize that the people who truly love you will love you for who you are, not for what you can provide. So, take a moment to really think about it. What would collapse if you stopped earning approval? Would your relationships fall apart? Would your career crumble? Would your world implode? Or would you finally be free to live on your own terms, to love without fear, to give without resentment, to be without apology? Here's the thing. The currency of shadows isn't just about money. It's about the ways you've traded pieces of yourself for safety, love, or approval. It's about the vows you've made to suffer, the bargains you've struck with fear, and the ways you've stayed small to avoid rejection. But once you bring these shadows into the light, once you see them for what they are, you can rewrite the terms. You can reclaim your power. You can reclaim your worth. You can reclaim your life. Now let's talk about how these shadows show up in everyday life. Think about the last time you said yes to something you didn't want to do. Maybe it was taking on extra work at your job, lending money to a friend, or attending an event you had no interest in. Why did you say yes? Was it because you genuinely wanted to, or because you were afraid of the consequences of saying no? This is the currency of shadows at work. It's the fear of rejection, the fear of conflict, the fear of being seen as selfish. And every time you say yes when you mean no, you're trading a piece of yourself for the illusion of safety or approval. Let's talk about the illusion of safety. Many of us cling to jobs, relationships, or habits that no longer serve us because they feel safe. They're familiar. They're predictable. But here's the truth. Familiarity isn't the same as safety. Predictability isn't the same as fulfillment. Staying in a job you hate because it pays the bills might feel safe in the short term, but what's the long-term cost? Your health? Your happiness? Your sense of purpose? The same is true for relationships. Staying with someone who doesn't appreciate you because you're afraid of being alone might feel safe, but what's the cost to your self-esteem? Your ability to trust? Your capacity for love? Now let's talk about the illusion of approval. Many of us spend our lives trying to earn the approval of others, our parents, our partners, our peers, even strangers on the internet. We dress a certain way, act a certain way, live a certain way because we think it will make us more likable, more acceptable, more worthy of love. But here's the truth. Approval is a moving target. The more you chase it, the further it gets. And even if you do manage to earn it, it's never enough. There's always someone else to impress, someone else to please, someone else to win over. Now, what about the role of fear in all of this? Fear is the currency of shadows. It's what keeps you stuck, what keeps you small, what keeps you trading pieces of yourself for the illusion of safety or approval. But here's the thing, fear isn't the enemy. It's a messenger. It's trying to tell you something. The key is to listen without letting it control you. When you feel fear, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? What's the most likely outcome? More often than not, you'll find that the fear is exaggerated, that the worst-case scenario isn't as bad as you think, and that the best-case scenario is worth the risk. So what do? Trust. Trust is the antidote to fear. It's the belief that you'll be okay no matter what. It's the belief that the universe has your back, that life is happening for you, not to you. Trust doesn't mean you won't face challenges or setbacks. It means you'll face them with courage, with resilience, with the knowledge that you're capable of handling whatever comes your way. So, how do you cultivate trust? Start by trusting yourself. Trust your instincts, your intuition, your inner wisdom. Trust that you know what's best for you, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. Then trust the process. Trust that life is unfolding exactly as it should, even if it doesn't look the way you expected. Trust that everything is happening for a reason, that you're exactly where you need to be. And after trust is love. Love is the ultimate currency. It's what fills the gaps, heals the wounds, and lights the way. But here's the thing, love starts with you. You can't give what you don't have. You can't love others fully if you don't love yourself. So, how do you cultivate self-love? Start by treating yourself with kindness, with compassion, with respect. Start by prioritizing your needs, your desires, your dreams. Start by saying no to the things that drain you and yes to the things that light you up. So, how do you break free? Awareness is the first step, but action is what creates change. It's not enough to recognize the shadows. You have to confront them. You have to challenge them. You have to rewrite the terms. This might mean having a difficult conversation, making a bold decision, or taking a leap of faith. It might mean stepping into the unknown, facing your fears, and trusting the process. Whatever it looks like for you, the key is to take action. So, what are you waiting for? The shadows will always be there, lurking in the corners, whispering in your ear. But you don't have to let them control you. You don't have to let them dictate your decisions, your relationships, or your relationship with money. You have the power to bring them into the light, to see them for what they are, and to rewrite the terms. You have the power to reclaim your power, your worth, your life. Chapter 7. The Freedom of Fluidity. Let's talk about the freedom of fluidity, the art of moving through life like water, adapting to change without losing your essence. This isn't about recklessness or abandoning responsibility. It's about releasing the death grip on control and trusting that life's currents can carry you to places rigid plans never could. It's about trading the illusion of certainty for the vitality of spontaneity. And here's the truth. The tighter you cling to how things should be, the more you miss the magic of how things could be. Let's start with the myth of control. You've likely spent years trying to micromanage outcomes, mapping career paths, scripting relationships, forecasting every financial move. On the surface, this feels wise, even responsible. But dig deeper, and you'll find it's often fear masquerading as prudence. Fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of looking foolish if things don't go as planned. Yet life has a funny way of laughing at blueprints. The job you meticulously planned evaporates. The relationship you scripted falters. The market you predicted shifts overnight. And suddenly, all that energy spent clinging to control leaves you exhausted, not empowered. Now let's talk about the cost of rigidity. Think of a tree that refuses to bend in the wind. It snaps. Now think of your life. How many opportunities have you missed because they didn't fit the plan? How much creativity have you stifled because it felt too risky? How many moments of joy have you bypassed because they weren't practical? Rigidity doesn't protect you, it isolates you. It turns your world into a museum. Everything perfectly arranged, but lifeless. Here's where fluidity changes everything. Water doesn't fight the rocks in its path. It flows around them, carves through them, and transforms them over time. It's relentless in its movement, but gentle in its approach. This is the mindset shift, seeing uncertainty not as a threat, but as a collaborator, a partner in reinvention. So, how do you cultivate this? Start by redefining failure. What if that career detour isn't a dead end, but a scenic route to something better? What if that financial stumble isn't a catastrophe, but a lesson in resilience? Fluidity thrives when you stop labeling experiences as good or bad and start asking, what can this teach me? Where can this lead? Let's confront the elephant in the room, trust. Trusting the process feels impossible when you've been burned before. But here's the secret. Trust isn't about blind faith. It's about building an unshakable relationship with yourself. It's knowing that no matter what life throws your way, you'll respond with creativity and grit, not panic. Try this. For 1 week, replace "what if it goes wrong" with "what if it goes right." Notice how your brain scrambles to answer. For years, you've trained it to catastrophize. Now you're asking it to dream. It'll feel awkward at first, like writing with your non-dominant hand. But awkwardness is the birthplace of growth. Now let's talk about money through this lens. Financial fluidity doesn't mean reckless spending. It means releasing the scarcity mindset that keeps you hoarding opportunities as well as dollars. It's the entrepreneur who pivots their business model when the market shifts, rather than clinging to a sinking ship. It's the investor who diversifies not just their portfolio but their thinking. It's you, realizing that a rigid budget that strangles joy is just as dangerous as no budget at all. What about relationships? Fluidity here means allowing people to evolve, including yourself. That friendship that's felt strained? Maybe it's not falling apart, but transitioning into something new. That partnership that requires compromise? Not a threat to your identity, but an invitation to grow. What would you attempt if stability weren't the goal? Sit with that. How much of your life has been engineered for predictability? The job you tolerate, the routines you hate, the dreams you've shelved, all sacrificed at the altar of safety. But what if true stability isn't found in sameness, but in your ability to adapt? This isn't just philosophy. Neuroscience shows that rigid thinking literally weakens your brain's problem-solving capacities. Fluidity, on the other hand, builds neural pathways that thrive on novelty. Every time you choose curiosity over fear, you're not just making a decision, you're upgrading your mind. So, how do you start? Start with small experiments. Take a different route to work. Have a conversation where you listen more than you speak. Allocate 10% of your budget to discovery spending, books, courses, experiences that stretch your perspective. Notice where resistance arises. That's your rigidity talking. Thank it for trying to protect you, then gently step past it. Let's address the fear of judgment. What will people think if I change? Here's the truth. Those committed to their own growth will cheer you on. Those threatened by it were never truly on your side, and most people won't even notice. Fluidity acts as a filter, attracting collaborators and releasing critics. Finally, remember, fluidity isn't the absence of boundaries. It's the presence of discernment. You're not a leaf blowing in the wind. You're the river choosing its path. Some banks you'll reshape. Others you'll honor and leave as they are. The power is in what you choose. So, what are you holding on to that's no longer serving you? A job title? A self-image? A number in your bank account? Whatever it is, imagine loosening your grip. Not abandoning your ideal, but allowing it to breathe. To evolve. To become something that fits the person you're becoming, not the person you once were. The freedom of fluidity isn't about having all the answers. It's about dancing with the questions. So put on your dancing shoes. The music's playing. Will you step onto the floor? Chapter 8, The Inheritance You Choose. Let's talk about the inheritance you choose, not the one handed to you in a will, but the one you consciously craft from the raw materials of your past. This isn't about DNA or trust funds. It's about the beliefs, habits, and stories you've absorbed from those who came before you. The ones that live in your blood, dictate your financial reflexes, and whisper, "This is just how it's done." But here's the truth. You're not a prisoner of your lineage. You're a curator. You get to sift through generations of baggage, keep what serves you, and leave the rest behind. Let's start with family lore. Every family has its money myths, stories told over dinner tables and holidays that shape how you view wealth. Maybe yours is the "we've always been strugglers" narrative, or the "money corrupts" cautionary tale, or the "don't get above your pay grade" warning. These stories aren't neutral. They're loaded with unspoken rules about what's possible, permissible, or right. But here's the thing. Family lore is just that, lore. It's not fact. It's folklore, and folklore can be edited. Now, let's talk about the generational relay race. Imagine your ancestors passing a baton forged from their triumphs, traumas, and survival strategies. Your grandmother's frugality, a response to scarcity. Your father's workaholism, a reaction to instability. These were solutions for their time. But here's the question, are they still solutions for yours? A relay racer doesn't run the same way their predecessor did. They adjust their grip, their stride, their pace. You have that same power. You can honor the baton without repeating the race. Let's dive deeper into guilt, the anchor that keeps you tied to inherited patterns. Guilt shows up when you out-earn your parents, when you reject their financial advice, when you dare to want more than they had. It hisses, "Who do you think you are?" But here's the truth, evolution isn't betrayal. Choosing a different path isn't ingratitude. It's how progress works. A sapling doesn't apologize for growing taller than the tree that shaded it. It becomes the new canopy. So, how do you rewrite the script? Start by auditing your inheritance. Sit down with a journal and ask, what money stories did my family tell? What did they celebrate? What did they fear? Write until your hand cramps. Then read it back. Circle the narratives that feel like shackles. Underline the ones that feel like wings. This isn't about blaming your past. It's about understanding it. You can't change what you don't see. Next, host a funeral for the stories that no longer serve you. Yes, a funeral. Light a candle, play sad music, write a eulogy for the beliefs you're burying. Here lies, rich people are selfish. It died when I realized abundance fuels generosity. Rituals matter. They signal to your subconscious that this is real, that you're serious. Now think this over. What if my choices today become someone else's freedom tomorrow? This question flips the script. Instead of carrying the weight of the past, you're building a bridge to the future. Every boundary you set, every risk you take, every dollar you invest differently isn't just about you. It's about the grandchild who'll never have to unlearn, "We've never had nice things." But here's where it gets gritty. Rewriting your inheritance means disappointing people. The parent who thinks you're wasting your potential in a creative career. The cousin who mocks your investments. The partner who fears your ambition. This isn't easy. But ask yourself, is their comfort worth your stagnation? Legacy building requires having a backbone, not consensus. Your ancestors' resilience is in your cells, their survival tactics, their ingenuity, their quiet rebellions. You're not erasing them, you're collaborating with them. Imagine your great-grandmother nodding as you negotiate a raise. Your grandfather grinning as you launch that side hustle. This isn't fantasy, it's reclamation. Now let's talk about the practical tools. Create a family money tree. Map out 3 generations, their jobs, their financial wins, their struggles. Look for patterns. Did the women handle budgets while the men avoided money talks? Did entrepreneurship skip a generation after a bankruptcy? Patterns reveal permission slips. They show you where the baton got dropped and where you can pick it up differently. Try this experiment. For 1 month, speak openly about money with your family. Not just numbers, but feelings. Ask your parent, what did money feel like when you were my age? Tell your sibling, I'm learning to invest. Want to explore it together? These conversations are seismic. They turn taboo into tradition. Finally, let's redefine legacy. It's not just about leaving money. It's about leaving a mindset. A child who sees you negotiate a salary learns to value their worth. A niece who watches you buy yourself nice things learns the value of self-care. A friend who hears you say, I don't know, but I'll figure it out, learns that uncertainty isn't fatal. So, what's your inheritance? Not the one you were given, the one you're choosing. Every dollar earned with integrity, every fear faced, every old story discarded. That's your real estate in the future. The past may have shaped you, but it doesn't own you. The baton's in your hand now. How will you run your leg of the race? Chapter 9. The Liberation of Laughter. Let's talk about the liberation of laughter, the radical act of taking money less seriously to unlock the flow it's meant to have. This isn't about irresponsibility or dismissing very real financial struggles. It's about recognizing that money, at its core, is energy. And energy stagnates when treated like a spreadsheet and thrives when treated like a dance. You've spent years counting steps. How much did I earn? How much did I save? How much is enough? But what if wealth isn't in the steps, but in the rhythm? Let's start with the tyranny of seriousness. Society teaches you that money is a solemn subject. You're supposed to furrow your brow over budgets, nod gravely at interest rates, and discuss investments like you're planning a military campaign. But here's the truth. Solemnity is the enemy of creativity. You'll never innovate, negotiate, or invest boldly if you're paralyzed by the weight of getting it right. The most successful people I know, the ones who've built empires and transformed industries, aren't solemn. They're playful. They treat money like a game they're determined to win, not a test they're terrified to fail. Now, let's talk about the billionaire's secret. No, it's not a hedge fund or a tax loophole. It's play. The ability to approach problems with curiosity instead of dread. To experiment, iterate, and laugh when an idea flops. To see money not as a measure of worth, but as a tool for exploration. Think about it. Children build entire worlds with sticks and mud. They don't obsess over ROI. They're too busy creating. Somewhere along the way, you traded sticks for spreadsheets and forgot that playing is the ultimate strategy. Let's dive deeper into the idea of wealth as a dance. Dancing isn't about taking stiff steps. It's about feeling the music, adapting to your partner, surrendering to the moment. Money works the same way. Clutch it too tightly, and you stumble. Obsess over the choreography, and you miss the joy of movement. But when you relax into the rhythm, when you trust your instincts, embrace spontaneity, and let the music guide you, that's when magic happens. That's when opportunities you never planned for waltz into your life. So, how do you dance with money instead of wrestling it? Start by auditing your relationship with fun. When's the last time you did something financially playful? Bought a stock just because the company's mission made you grin? Tipped 50% because the barista's joke made your day? Invested in a hobby that lights you up, even if it'll never make money? Play isn't frivolous. It's how you reconnect with the why behind the what. It's how you remember that money is a means, not an end. Now let's address the guilt. How can I play when people are struggling? When I have bills to pay? When the world's on fire? These are valid questions. But here's the truth. Play isn't the opposite of responsibility. It's the antidote to burnout. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't solve big problems with a shriveled spirit. The scientists who cured diseases doodled in notebooks. The entrepreneurs who changed the world started with, "Wouldn't it be cool if?" Joy isn't a distraction from the work. It's the fuel. What if joy is the ROI? Not a byproduct, but the actual return on investment. What if the metric for financial success wasn't just your net worth, but your joy worth? How would you spend differently? Invest differently? Work differently? Suddenly, that impractical passion project looks like a necessity. That risky career pivot feels like an alignment. That indulgent purchase becomes an investment in your creativity. Try this experiment. Host a financial play date. For one day, make every money decision through the lens of joy. Buy the quirky coffee table book that sparks ideas. Go to that restaurant that you have been eyeing. Shop in the stores without checking the prices. Notice how your relationship with money shifts when pleasure, not pressure, drives the wheel. Let's confront the myth of scarcity humor. You know the jokes, I'm broke LOL, adulting is hard, I'll never retire. They bond us, sure, but they also cement a mindset of lack. What if you rewrote the script? I'm figuring it out and having fun doing it. Money's a wild ride, but I'm learning the moves. Language shapes reality. Laugh with your financial journey, not at it. Now, let's talk about the science of play. Neurologically, play triggers the release of dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals that boost creativity, trust, and problem-solving. In other words, when you're having fun, your brain works better. That silly brainstorming session? It might birth your next big idea. That frivolous social event? It could lead to a partnership that changes everything. Play isn't procrastination, it's peak performance in disguise. So, how do you institutionalize play? Start small. Add a joy line item to your budget. For stuff or experiences that make you feel alive, a pottery class, a weekend road trip, a fancy cheese plate just because. Then audit your time. Are you scheduling play with the same rigor as meetings? Block an hour weekly for financial fun, exploring new investment apps, designing a vision board, reading a money memoir that inspires instead of lectures. Now to the skeptics who are scoffing at this chapter. This sounds naive. The system's rigged. You can't just play your way to wealth. True, play isn't a substitute for strategy, but it is a catalyst for it. When you're enjoying the process, you outlast the grinders. When you're curious, you spot opportunities the anxious miss. When you're laughing, you build resilience to weather storms. The system's rigged for those who can stay in the game longest. Play is your endurance secret. Finally, let's redefine wealthy. It's not a number. It's a feeling. The freedom to work on your terms, the space to breathe between obligations, the capacity to give without depletion, the privilege of time to waste on beauty. You can't spreadsheet your way there. You have to dance. So, what's your next move? The music's playing. The floor's open. You can keep counting steps in the corner, or you can step into the rhythm. Here's a hint. The dancers always attract the spotlight. Conclusion: the unchained potential. Let's talk about unchained potential. The moment you realize that financial freedom isn't a distant summit, but the ground beneath your feet. This isn't about arriving. It's about awakening. You've spent lifetimes negotiating with fear, bowing to inherited stories, and mistaking survival for living. But here's the truth. The chains were never locked. They were just draped over your shoulders, and you've always held the key. Today, remove those chains. Let's start by revisiting the journey, not to retrace steps, but to recognize how far you've come. You began by excavating the stories buried in your financial DNA, those whispered legacies of lack and limitation. You met the ghosts in your wallet, the ones who mistook guilt for love and hustle for worth. You danced with the paradox of enough, learning that abundance isn't a number but a heartbeat. You even laughed in the face of money's solemnity, trading spreadsheets for spontaneity. Now, standing here, you're not the same person who opened this book. You're lighter, wiser, unbound. But here's the secret no one tells you. Freedom from money blocks isn't a one-time declaration. It's a daily practice. Like a muscle, it atrophies without use. So how do you keep it strong? By refusing to pick up your shackles. By remembering that the comfort of the cage is a lie. By choosing every day to walk in the direction of your curiosity rather than the shadow of your fear. Let's talk about the myth of someday. Someday I'll feel secure. Someday I'll take that risk. Someday I'll prioritize joy. But someday is a thief. It robs you of the only currency that matters, now. The richest moments of your life won't only be marked by commas in your bank account, but by periods in your obituary. She lived fully. He loved boldly. They dared greatly. Financial freedom isn't just a bank balance. It's the permission slip to live that wealthy life today. Let's dive deeper into legacy. Not the one you're leaving, but the one you're living. Every dollar you earn, spend, or give is a vote for the world you want. Funding your cousin's art classes? That's a vote for creativity. Walking away from a toxic job? That's a vote for self-worth. You're not just managing money. You're curating a microcosm of your ideals. And ripples become waves. Surround yourself with people who speak the dialect of abundance, who cheer your risks and call out your self-sabotage. Fire the committee in your head that still debates your worth. Hire a new board of directors, the version of you that's already free, the ancestor who dreamed bigger, the future self who whispers, keep going. Build a freedom fund, not an emergency account, but a reservoir for leaps of faith. Seed it with money that's off limits for bills and guilt. Use it to say yes to the conference that terrifies you, the sabbatical that rekindles your spark, the investment that feels like a love letter to your future. Watch how this fund becomes a mirror, reflecting back your growing trust in yourself. Let's address the critics that may still be here. This is naive. The system's rigged. True and irrelevant. Rigged systems topple under the weight of enough people refusing to play small. Your liberation isn't just for you. It's a flare gun announcing to others, it's possible. Every time you negotiate a raise, you shift the salary curve for your peers. Every time you start a business, you redirect capital's course. Every time you model financial joy, you give permission for others to follow your path and do the same. Let me leave you with this. Wealth is not net worth. It's net wonder, the awe of a life where money is a brush, not a cage. Where you paint boldly, erase without regret, and sign your name to a masterpiece that's forever evolving. So, what's your first stroke on this blank canvas? The palette is yours. The chains are off. The world is waiting. If you enjoyed this audiobook, give this video a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. To download the ebook, click the link in the description.